So I wanted to talk about the Sean Combs trial because I feel like there's a lot of bad information going around. Like some people genuinely think that Sean Combs is about to be let go because the prosecution dropped the charges against him because people don't really understand the legal proceedings or the complexity of the legal world.
Charges have been dropped. You're telling me this man is actually getting away?
Okay, so the government has just dropped a bunch of charges against P. Diddy.
And I don't blame them. It's a lot to process. But no, in fact, Sean Combs is not going free as of yet. The trial is still ongoing. The jury is still trying to find him guilty or not guilty. And as of today, as I'm recording this, they are deliberating on his fate. This video is not going to have a lot of editing, so feel free to put it on the background, like some background noise or something. And I hope you enjoy the video. So before I start hating, I want to talk about some good things because I don't want to just be a negative person. I think oftentimes when we criticize things, we forget to shine a spotlight on people who are doing the good thing or, in my opinion, are doing a good thing. So I wanted to take this time to say that I think Stephanie from Rotten Mangoes is doing a really good job of covering this trial, being fair, unbiased, and giving us good information to go by. Usually I don't pay attention to true crime court hearings or true crime court cases while they're ongoing. I like to go back later and look over the information. I'm writing a larger video essay about the Sean Combs trial and how people are treating it and talking about it. So I've kind of had to live in the moment, so to say. So it's really good to have a good news source that I know that I can trust to go to, and they are going to give me unbiased information. Some of the things that she does well that I like is that she doesn't rush her episodes out. She takes time. She has 2 other people with her, and that's important because we're all biased, right? Like I'm biased, you're biased. And even if we're trying to be unbiased, we have things that we might mishear or misremember. So 3 people there can offer their own experiences, and it kind of cancels out each other biases, if that makes sense. And so when you go there for information, you're getting not just Stephanie's perspective on what's happening, you're getting her team's perspective. And she's very clear when she doesn't know, it's not her area of expertise. And she's very clear when something is her opinion or something is fact. And I like that. And you might be thinking, why don't you just watch mainstream journalists cover it? And I don't really think they do a good job, and that's a whole different video. But for example, Stephanie had a whole section of her video dedicated to the jury selection and the defense accusing the prosecution of racially profiling one of the jurors and trying to get them removed, and how there's a whole conversation if this was true or not true. And that's important to me because I'm Black. And I know it's important to a lot of people, whether you agree or disagree, because Sean Combs is a influential person in Black culture. So people want to know if there's racial profiling going on in a jury because that has historically and systematically happened in America. I looked and I didn't find really any other like mainstream news outlet mention this, right? I didn't, like, this whole conversation about the jury or the jury selection was just like a cliff note, but that's actually really important because they're the people deciding your fate, right? You should know if they're unbiased or if they're fair at least. And this isn't just a problem with the Sean Combs trial. Like mainstream media does a really bad job about court cases. You saw that with the Karen Reed trial recently. At first, the mainstream media, their local media, was not on Karen Reed's side, whether you think that she's guilty or not. They weren't unbiased. They were clearly on the side of the local city in that instance. And so I don't have a problem with non-mainstream journalism or medium, whatever. But I think it's important to realize that they are not unbiased as people think. Just like how Stephanie has her biases, mainstream media has theirs, and you should look at both to get a better picture of what's happening, right? But anyway, secondly, what I like is that if you go into a comment section on some of the videos, you will see people who claim to be lawyers or profess to be lawyers in the comment section discussing why people are doing this and why they're not doing this. And, people on the internet, people lie, right? But it's still, from what I can gather, it seems correct. It still seems like a good discussion of because, for example, Stephanie will say in one of her videos, the defense seemed like they were rambling. It didn't really make sense to me. Maybe you guys will know. And then you can go in the comment section. You could see actual defense lawyers talking about the case in the comment section. I feel like I'm learning something through osmosis, almost through their discussions in the comment section. That's another thing I like. On TikTok comment section, that's not really a thing that happens, especially because, and people don't really know this, TikTok selects comments for you. It filters comments that it knows that you'll probably agree with, or maybe the better word is engage with. So everybody has their own comments at the top that are not, it doesn't go by the amount of likes a comment gets. It goes by your algorithm and what TikTok thinks the comments that you want to see. YouTube doesn't really do that. YouTube is kind of a meritocracy in the comment section unless you sort by new. It's one of the reasons that TikTok is such an echo chamber. So if somebody posts something incorrect on a TikTok video, you don't really get the true information. You can't go to the comment sections and get the true information or have them corrected by somebody who's actually true, because your TikTok algorithm will filter the comment sections for you in a specific way. And that's one of the things that you're seeing, to switch topics real fast, is that people, there's like a bunch of viral memes like, oh, Sean Combs is about to go free. Oh, Sean Combs is about to go free. Like, oh my God. And people were even saying like, oh my God, hide Stephanie. That's because Stephanie has been having a real lot of weird experiences at the Sean Combs trial. Like people like coming up to her, like trying to intimidate her almost. And that's really scary. And that's another reason that I think we should spotlight, because it's kind of brave to have this many weird experiences at the Sean Combs trial and still speaking up, still covering your truth. I think we should acknowledge that.
Diddy was staring her down like this and then mouthed the words, "I know you." And to me, knowing how Diddy works, I really feel like he is trying to intimidate her. And then the fact that she started talking about getting really weird questions from random people when she was coming out of the courtroom, asking where she was staying recently, is even more terrifying. Since she's been in the courtroom covering the Diddy trial, she said that she has moved hotel rooms 8 times to keep her team safe. But she said more recently, there have been more and more people coming up to her, only asking where she's staying at. And this paired with Diddy staring her down and saying,
But back to the comment section, like people legitimately believed, people were making videos that they thought that Sean Combs was going to go completely free, that the trial was a waste of time. And all of the comments are like a feedback loop because it's algorithmically selected. They know that you want doomerism basically in the comment section. So they're just repeating the same tired message. Side note, this is why if you're ever on TikTok and people will be like, why are there, all I see is people complaining about the negative comments. I don't see any. It's because your algorithm selects the comments that you want to see. They know you don't want to see negative comments, so it won't show you negative comments. Or the negative comments will be at the bottom, if that makes sense. To get back to Stephanie, one of the most important things she does is make it clear when she is not an expert in an area. And that's important because the law is complex. And this is what is wrong with TikTok and why I'm making the video. The law is complex, right? So take this thing where people thought that Sean Combs was going to be released, right? It's because the prosecutors changed, they dropped jury instructions. They didn't drop charges. And that doesn't really make sense, but the charges, I don't even know how to explain it. I'll try to the best I can. The charges are the crime, but there's elements of the charges. So like, I guess the title, and then you have the definition below in a layman's term. And so they can just drop certain elements and say, hey, focus on this. You only have to find him guilty of this one thing. And it gets complex even with people who are in the trial system. The jury instructions can be complex. And that actually happened in the Karen Reed trial, where the jurors were confused. And that's why a lot of people say that the first trial ended in a mistrial, because the jury instructions were confusing. So the prosecution team was, by my guess, I don't know, probably trying to make it clearer to the jury.
Let's break it all down. I'm an attorney and I read what happened, so you don't have to. The government wrote that they understand the court's desire for streamlined instructions. With that in mind, the government has suggested ways to streamline those instructions. Specifically, the government has removed instructions from the charges.
The judge and attorneys for both sides held meetings where they finalized jury instructions. Headline-making news came out of this when it was decided by the prosecution to remove some of the terms. The prosecution is telling the jury to focus on fewer things that they're sure prove Diddy's guilt. And after this...
But to everyone else who was not in a legal system, who do not understand the legal terminology, people got that, oh, they're dropping the charges. This was a waste of time. And then people were like, see, I knew he was going to get off. I knew it. And it like spiraled from there. It snowballed from there. And that's what I want to focus on, is that people have opinions on things, and I think that's fine. But I think that the criminal justice system is not the real world we live in. It is a magical, mystical world. And I say that not to diminish anything or to make light of anything. I genuinely mean that is a different, separate reality of the reality we live in. Example of this, I watched a divorce lawyer. He was talking about how in one of his cases, his client was technically legally at fault, or whatever. And his client, the person he was going against, the person against his client, she had evidence, right? But her lawyer was so bad, did not know what she was doing, that she could not admit the evidence into the court system. So he won simply because the lawyer the lawyer that he was going against did not know how to admit evidence to prove that his client was guilty, right? Or it was divorce court, so whatever guilty is in divorce court.
She's poor. That's why she's going to lose. She's going to lose because she's poor. And she can't afford a lawyer. And he's going to win because he can afford a lawyer that knows how to put a document into evidence quite badly. And getting a photograph into evidence is very easy, but it requires a very specific phrasing. So what you say is, I'd like this to be more.
You have to say the magic words to get it admitted into evidence. And a lot of people don't know that. They don't think that, like, that's like nonsensical. Like, oh, you already have evidence. Like, you have evidence of like that proves you're innocent. It doesn't matter. You have to say the magic words, right? That happened in the Karen Reed trial. There were things that people were like, you know, this obviously proves that she's innocent, right? Why can the jury not hear about it? It's because there's rules, regulations, and the judge decides what is and isn't seen. It is not like real life where you can just, like, if you have a photo proving your innocence, you can just be like, here, see, like, look at this. You have special rules, this magical realm. The word I'm looking for is not intuitive. Like, things that you think would work don't necessarily work. Sometimes you can actually literally have something that doesn't make logical sense, but it makes legal sense. So I'll give you an example of this. I think Steve Leto covered this on his channel. He was talking about how in a case, prosecutor's argument was only one person could do this crime. And here's where the illogical part comes into play. He charged two separate people with that same crime and tried them the same way, where he used the same argument. Only one person could commit this crime. It has to be this guy. And he used that same argument on two different people. And legally, that makes sense, but logically, it doesn't, right? And, you know, feel free to correct me if I'm saying anything wrong. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn. And so the only reason I know like 1% of this stuff or 2% of this stuff is that I studied criminal science. That was going to be my major before I switched to computer science. Not in criminal science, like not even the psychology around criminals. Like some of that is like, why do people commit crimes is some of it, but it's also how laws are implemented and like the statistics and how laws come about, how we should craft laws to have them better implemented, stuff like that. It's like, it's more of a policy degree than a psychological degree, if that makes sense. But I switched because I'm broke and I couldn't afford it. But I got like halfway through, so I had to take a lot of law classes before I switched to computer science. So that's the only reason I know 1%. And I know enough to know that I don't really know anything. So that's why I'm always careful when I'm talking about the law. And you have to be, because we have 50 states, right? And it's impossible for one person to know. This is the actual advice that people will tell you. Like if you go on Reddit and you look for legal advice, they'll be like, nobody really can help you. You need a lawyer in your state. I'm not a lawyer. This is not a legal advice, by the way. But they'll be like, I'm not in your state. I don't know the laws of your state. And that's like, my point is that, you know, if you're an influencer and you get online and you're like, no, this isn't legal or whatever, you're only talking about your state or your limited experience. One state, if you're like in Wisconsin, could be entirely different from California's laws or Texas's laws, or even their case law about like how the laws are interpreted in Texas or in Wisconsin. It's almost impossible to know like 99% how something is going to go because it's an entirely different legal system almost. Or maybe that's a stretch. Like it's half different, right? And it gets back to this, like your intuitive sense of how things are going. So I'll give you an example because this in the Sean Combs trial, right? Because prosecutors get the last word, and she reminded them. She was like, for you to find him guilty, you don't have to find a pattern. It does not have to happen repeatedly. If he has done that one single time, he is guilty of at least, how do you say this in YouTube term? The ST charge, right? He is guilty of that ST charge. And people are like, wait, what? Yeah, like that's how the law works. One time. And you might, in your head, you might think like, no, there's no way that you could do something one time and you could get the maximum is like 10 years at sentencing. And it's like, yes, that's how the law works. It's not intuitive. People don't understand that. The prosecutor remind them is like, even if you think Cassie agreed 99 times, if out of 100 times she disagreed once, that's all it takes. And he's guilty. And there's nothing you can say because if everybody is being honest in this situation, if you've listened to all the witnesses, at least one time you can say that was not consensual and that he coerced or he bribed someone into doing something that they're not supposed to, then he's guilty. At least one time. Be honest with yourself. One time. But people's brains, the way that they work, they're like, no way, it's just one time. The one time to get convicted, like one time example. Again, the legal system is not like our everyday life. It's not like that at all. This is going to get into like where I'm not really familiar how it really works. So take this with 100 grains of salt or 100,000 pounds of salt. People are like, why is Cassie not charged? They're just choosing not to charge her. The prosecutors can do that. They can just choose not to charge you, right? They have ultimate discretion in what charges they bring. An example of this is that the hotel manager, hotel staff, or whatever, they saw a crime being committed. They didn't say anything, and they didn't report it. And somebody alleges that they covered it up. Then they would be a part of the conspiracy, and they could be charged with the conspiracy. But the prosecutors is choosing not to do that because they don't want him. They want Sean Combs. That's my opinion. Again, take it with a lot of grain of salt, and especially if you cooperate, well, then they're gonna get Sean Combs. They're not going to go after you. That's why they're cooperating. People are like, why is he in a RICO but nobody else is being charged? And it's because they're cooperating. At least that's my opinion of it. That actually example of that is the state charges. Like in California, nobody really can look at that video and be like, that's not kidnapping. Like she was trying to escape from him and he dragged her back into the room. That's obviously kidnapping. But when the California prosecutor, the lead prosecutor, was like, well, you know, the statute of limitations was up in that time period. Therefore, we can't charge him with anything. That's not true. Kidnapping in California, the statute of limitations is a lot more. They just didn't want to charge him because they knew that the feds were going to come in and they didn't want to waste the taxpayer money on it. Or they didn't want to waste the time charging him because they didn't know if they could prove or win the case. Either or. That's my opinion. You can take it with a grain of salt. But what's not an opinion is that prosecutors have ultimate discretion, or at least in theory they do. And that's why a lot of people don't realize that. They think that the law is the law is the law, and that who gets charged and who doesn't. Like, if you just break the law, like, no, that's not how that works. An actual example of this is the Karen Reed trial. They said that after the mistrial, they're not going to try to find who actually did it. Or, I mean, after the trial, the jury found her not guilty. The prosecutor's office said that they're not going to try to find a new suspect for that crime case, right? Again, they have ultimate discretion. They can choose whether they're going to try to find somebody who did that crime for the Karen Reed case, or they can just be like, well, we don't really know who did it. Hands up in the air. They have discretion over whether that whole thing is up to their decisions and what they choose or choose not to do. So they can choose who to go after. They can choose a suspect. They can choose to file charges, or they can choose not to. They can choose to close a case. They can choose to open a case. It's a whole entire thing. And it's up to their interpretation. That's why a lot of people don't even know this, is that in one county, because the prosecutor's office is different, you can have in a total different criminal case compared to a county over. You could get probation in one case, and then in a whole different county, you know, if you go 5 minutes over, you could get a year in prison, right? And that even goes to the Sean Combs trial. I don't think anybody thinks he's going to walk completely free, but they're going to max him on it because he took it to trial, and then at trial they have like guidelines. So they're going to just bump him up to the max guidelines because to be honest, he fits all of the max guidelines, because in the guideline hearing, they're allowed, from my interpretation, what I've heard from people who discuss the law, is that they're allowed to bring in stuff that they did bring into trial. So they're allowed to be like, oh, he did DV here. Oh, he did SA here. Oh, like he's shown a pattern of criminality, et cetera, et cetera. And then, you know, all of these booster guidelines, they give you points. You get points off for like taking accountability, but you get extra points depending on your behavior or your past criminality, right? So people's interpretation of that is wrong, because that's even different from the state level, because the federal level is different. So people having their interpretations from the state level, where at sentencing they can't bring in all this other stuff, or maybe they just don't want to, or they don't have a guidelines, or they don't have a point system. But at the federal level, you're going to get the entire wrong interpretation of what's actually happening. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the video. Click here for the next one. Have a great day. Peace.